Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay. So today we're going to continue on the story of Venerable Mahākassapa, and where we left off the last time was where he and before he was ordained as a monk, he was from a very wealthy family, owned a big piece of land, had a bunch of servants. Also had a wife by the name of Bhadda Kapilani. And where we last left off was both of them decided to renunciate the lay life. Venerable Mahākassapa continued on his journey separately, and Bhadda Kapilani also went separately. And eventually, Bhadda Kapilani first ended up with a community of nuns. At that time, not Buddhist nuns, because that wasn't set up yet. And then subsequently later, when Venerable Ananda convinced the Buddha to set up the community of bhikkhunis, then Bhadda Kapilani also joined that community. So today we're going to continue with the what was the connection, the past lives of Mahākassapa and Bhadda Kapilani, and how they were connected before this final life. Okay, so Mahākassapa and Bhadda Kapilani originally formed their aspirations to great discipleship under the Buddha Padumuttara, who is the 15th Buddha of antiquity, who arose 100,000 aeons in the past. That's a very, 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 very long time ago. One aeon is, if I remember correctly, it is the explosion and start of the universe. So then the universe expands. And then it stops, the expansion stops, and it just stays like that for a period of time. And then after that period of time is over, and then the universe contracts until nothingness. I mean, like black hole. And then it stays like that, where there is no any form of life form at that period. So again, same amount of time, and then again, big bang, boom, and then expand again. So the process of expansion and contraction of the universe, if I remember correctly, is considered one aeon. So the Buddha Padumuttara came into being taught that time as a Buddha 100,000 aeons in the past. So you can imagine that's a really long time ago. So the Buddha Padumuttara had his main monastic seat in the Khema Deer Park near the city of Hamsavati. So this was an ancient city of that time. And at that time, the future Kassapa was a wealthy landowner named Vedeha, and Bhadda was his wife. So one day, Vedeha went to the monastery and was seated in the assembly at the very moment that the teacher declared an elder named Mahākassapa his third preeminent disciple, the foremost of the proponents of the ascetic practices. So ascetic practices are like a bunch of practices where, let's say, they take minimal food, their lodging is very basic. There are different types of ascetic practices. So this lay devotee Vedeha was pleased by this and invited the teacher, the Buddha Padumuttara, and his entire Sangha to his home for the next day's meal. While the Buddha and the monks were in his house taking their meal, the lay devotee caught sight of the elder Mahākassapa, the one who was foremost in the ascetic practices. So the elder was walking on his arms round down the street. He went outside and invited the elder to join the gathering at his house, but the elder declined. And Vedeha took his bowl, filled it with food, brought it back to him. When he returned to the house, he asked the Buddha about the reason for the elder's strange refusal, because everyone else, the Buddha, all the other monks were at Veda's house. Then the teacher explained, lay devotee, we accept invitations to homes for meals, but that bhikkhu lives solely on food gained on alms round. We live in town monasteries, but he lives solely in the forest. We live with a roof over our head, but he lives out in the open air. When the lay devotee Vedeha heard this, he became even more pleased, like an oil lamp sprinkled with oil. So, when you see an oil lamp and then you just take some oil and you just, sprinkle like this, the oil lamp goes, yeah. So this was kind of to visualize that pleasure in him. And he reflected, why should I be satisfied simply with arahatship? I will make an aspiration to become the foremost disciple among the practitioners of the ascetic practices under a Buddha in the future. So because of his aspiration, he actually ended up like that, but many, 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 many lifetimes in the future, he was very ambitious and also in a way very inspired by this elder Mahākassapa and his practice. So because he was so inspired, he was like, oh, I want to be like him in the future. So then he invited the Buddha and the community of monks to his home for alms for a week, made presentations of the triple robe to the entire Sangha, and prostrating him at the master's feet, declared his aspirations. Then the Buddha Padumuttara looked into the future and saw that the aspiration would be fulfilled. He then gave Vedeha the prediction. In the future, 100,000 aeons from now, a Buddha named Gotama will arise in the world. Under him, you will be the third chief disciple named Mahākassapa. Bhadda, on her part, had been inspired by the bhikkhuni pronounced the foremost among those who recollect their past lives, and she formed the aspiration to attain this position under a future Buddha. She too was assured by the Lord Padumuttara that her wish would be fulfilled. So for the rest of their lives, the couple observed the precepts, did meritorious deeds, and after death, they were reborn in heaven. And the next past life recorded for Mahākassapa and Bhadda Kapilani. So this one recorded. So in between, they could have had other lives. Yeah, so the one that's recorded next takes place much later during the dispensation of the Buddha Vipassi, the sixth predecessor of the Buddha Gotama. So 6 Buddhas before Buddha Gotama. And at this time, they had been a poor Brahmin couple. And they were so extremely poor that they had only a single upper garment. And hence, only one of them at a time could go out of their hut. And in this story, the Brahmin was therefore called he with one garment. And though it may not be easy for us to understand such extreme poverty, it will be still more difficult to understand that there have been many people for whom such utter poverty did not mean subjective deprivation. And this was so with those two beings who later were to become Mahākassapa and Bhadda. In their life as that poor Brahmin couple, they had lived in such perfect harmony that their happiness was not diminished by their indigence. One day, when the Buddha Vipassi was to give a special sermon, they both wished to attend, but as they had only a single upper garment between them, they could not both go at the same time. So the wife went during the day, and her husband went at night. And as the Brahmin listened to the sermon, the value of giving and generosity became so deeply impressed on him that he wanted to offer his only upper garment to the Buddha. But after he had so resolved, scruples came to his mind. This is our only upper garment, so perhaps I should first consult with my wife. How can we manage without an upper garment? How can we get a replacement? But he resolutely pushed aside all such hesitation and placed the garment at the Blessed One's feet. Having done that, he clapped his hands and joyfully called out, I have vanquished, I have vanquished. That means he managed to let go that hesitation and offer the only garment he and his wife had. And when the king, who had listened to the sermon behind a curtain, heard that shout of victory and came to know the reason, he sent sets of garments to the Brahmin and later made him his court chaplain. So the couple's plight had come to an end. And as a result of his selfless giving, the Brahmin was reborn in a celestial world. And after parting from there, he became a king on earth, a great benefactor of his people who generously supported the ascetics living at that time. And Bhadda was then his chief queen. And as to Bhadda, she was once the mother of a Brahmin youth who was a pupil of the Bodhisattva, means the current Buddha, before he became the Buddha. So she was a mother of the pupil, and that her son wanted to become an ascetic. So Mahākassapa was her husband, Ananda was the son, was the pupil. And Bhadda had wanted her son to know the worldly life before she would permit him to become an ascetic. But that knowledge came to the young Brahmin in a drastic and heart-rending way. His teacher's old mother fell passionately in love with him and was even ready to kill her son for his sake. This encounter with reckless passion caused in him a deep revulsion for worldly life. And after that experience, his parents gave him permission to go forth as an ascetic. Another time, Kassapa and Bhadda had been the Brahmin parents of 4 sons, who in the future were to be our Bodhisattva, means the Buddha, Anuruddha, another one of the chief disciples, Sariputta, and Mahamoggallana. All 4 wanted to become ascetics. At first, the parents refused permission, but later they came to understand the fruits and benefits of the ascetic life. They themselves became ascetics. And in still another life, 2 village headmen who were friends decided that the children they were expecting, so even before the children were born, they decided the children should marry each other if they were of the opposite sex. So if one of the child was a boy and the other child happened to be a girl, then these 2 friends, village headmen, said, okay, our children shall marry. And so it happened. But in their previous life, both children had been deities of the Brahma world. Hence, they had no desire for sensual pleasures and, with their parents' permission, chose the ascetic life. So in the book, you see J509, J540, that's in reference to the Jataka tales. So Bhadda's only wrong act reported in the stories of her past life was this. At a time between the appearance of two Buddhas, Bhadda was the wife of a landowner. And one day she had a quarrel with her sister-in-law. And just then a Pacheka Buddha is a Buddha who also self-enlightened but doesn't teach. So sometimes referred as a silent Buddha. So just then a Pacheka Buddha drew near to their house on arm's round. And when her sister-in-law offered him food, Bhadda, seeking to spite her, took the Pacheka's Buddha's bowl, threw away the food, and filled the bowl with mud. And at once, however, she was stung by remorse. She took the bowl back, washed it with sand, and filled it with delicious, fragrant food. And then she offered it back to the Pacheka Buddha and apologized for her rudeness. So sometimes we have to be careful, when sometimes because of the mind state, because just a simple quarrel, we tend to lose our mind, literally. And so in this case, she kind of lost her sense of logic and out of spite because of the quarrel she had. She did something which she regretted. And as a karmic consequence of this deed, a mixture of the dark and bright. A mixture of dark and bright because dark meaning, well, she took the Pacheka Buddha's bowl and threw away the food and then put mud in the bowl. But then bright because, after that she regretted, so she took the bowl back and she washed it very well and then put very good, delicious food inside and then apologized as well to the Pacheka Buddha. So it's a mixture, dark and bright. So in her next life, Bhadda possessed wealth and great beauty, but her body exuded a loathsome odor. And her husband, the future Kassapa, could not bear the noxious smell and left her. As she was beautiful, other suitors sought her hand, but all her later marriages had the same end. And she was full of despair and felt there was no point continuing to live. To dispose of her property, she had her ornaments melted down and formed into a golden brick, which she brought to the monastery as a contribution to the stupa being erected in honor of the Buddha Kassapa at that time, who had just passed away. And she offered the golden brick with great devotion. And as a consequence, her body became fragrant again, and her first husband, Kassapa, took her back. And 2 lives before her present existence, Bhadda was the queen of Benares and used to support several Pacheka Buddhas. And deeply moved by their sudden death, she renounced her worldly life as a queen and lived a meditative life in the Himalayas. And by the power of her renunciation and her meditative attainments, she was reborn in the Brahma world, and so was Kassapa. And it was after that life in the Brahma world that they were reborn in the human world as Kassapa and Bhadda Kapilani. And from these accounts, we gather that in their former existences, both had lived a life of purity in the Brahma world and that both had repeatedly been renunciants. Hence, in their final existence, it was not difficult for them to keep a life of celibacy, to give up all possessions, and to follow the Buddha's teaching to its culmination in Arahatship. Okay, so that was a short chapter. I was hoping to keep how Kassapa came to the Buddha in the next reading. Let's see, how long is this one? Oh, it's also not that long. What say you, Paul and Pi? Would you like to continue the next section, or shall we leave that to the next reading? What do you reckon?
Carry on, I think.
Carry on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's It's another short one. Okay. Yeah, okay, so let's carry on. How Kassapa came to the Buddha. So now we go back to the final life, continuing from before we talked about their past lives. So we shall now return to Mahākassapa. Now, where did he go after he had come to the crossroads? So if you remember from a previous reading, they came to a crossroad. Then Mahākassapa said to Bhadda Kapilani, well, you know, I've renounced, I've become an ascetic, so it will be weird for you to kind of follow from behind. People will say things, so let's take separate roads. So that was the crossroads, so they both separated. So as mentioned above, when the two ascetics separated, the earth shook by the force of their act of renunciation. The Buddha perceived this trembling of the earth and knew that it meant an outstanding disciple was on the way to him. And without informing any of the monks, he set out on the road alone, walking the distance of 5 miles to meet his future pupil, an act of compassion which later was often praised. So he actually went out to meet and walked 5 miles to meet Mahākassapa. And on the road between Rajagaha and Nalanda, the master sat down under a banyan tree by the Bahuputaka shrine, waiting for his future disciple to arrive. He did not sit there like an ordinary ascetic, but displayed all the sublime glory of a Buddha. He emitted rays of light for 80 meters all around, so that the entire thicket became a single mass of light, and he manifested all his 32 marks of a great man. And when Kassapa reached the spot and saw the Buddha sitting there in the full splendor of an enlightened one, he thought, this must be my master for whose sake I have gone forth. And he approached the Buddha, fell at his feet and exclaimed, the Blessed One, Lord, is my teacher, and I am his disciple. The Blessed One, Lord, is my teacher, and I am his disciple. And the enlightened one said, Kassapa, if anyone who does not know and see were to say to a disciple, endowed with such sincerity as yourself, I know, I see, his head would split. But Kassapa, knowing, I say, I know. Seeing, I say, I see. He then gave Kassapa the following 3 exhortations as his first formal introduction to Dhamma. You should train yourself thus, Kassapa. A keen sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing shall be present in me towards seniors, novices, and those of middle status in the order. Whatever teaching I hear that is conducive to something wholesome, I shall listen with an attentive ear, examining it, reflecting on it, absorbing it with all my heart. Mindfulness of the body linked with gladness shall not be neglected by me. Thus, you should train yourself. This is one of the 3 things that the Buddha taught Mahākassapa. Now, according to the commentary, this triple exhortation constituted Kassapa's going forth and higher ordination together. So, back in the early days of the Sangha, the monks, the ordination was pretty basic, pretty simple. Usually the Buddha would just give, a couple of teachings, advice, and then say, okay, now you're ordained as a monk, finish. But then after that, there were more rules. But this example for Mahākassapa was the earlier part where it was really simple, just 3 teachings, and then, okay, now you're ordained as my disciple. So simple. And then both master and disciple walked toward Rajagaha. And on the way, the Buddha wanted to rest and went off the road to the root of a tree. Mahākassapa then folded his double robe in 4 and requested the master to sit on it, as this will be for my benefit for a long time. And the Buddha sat down on Kassapa's robe and said, "Soft is your robe of patch cloth, Kassapa." And hearing this, Kassapa replied, "May the Blessed One, O Lord, accept this robe of patch cloth out of compassion for me." "But Kassapa, can you wear these hempen, worn-out rag robes of mine?" And full of joy, Kassapa said, "Certainly, Lord, I can wear the Blessed One's rough and worn-out rag robes." And this exchange of robes bestowed a great distinction on the Venerable Mahākassapa, an honor not shared by any other disciple. And the commentary explains that the Buddha's intention in exchanging robes with Kassapa was to motivate him to observe the Dhutanga, the austere practices, from the time of his very admission into the Buddha Sangha. Although after his enlightenment, the Buddha condemned extreme self-mortification as a blind alley, which is painful and noble and unbeneficial, he by no means rejected those ascetic practices that harmonized with the framework of the middle way. The true middle way is not a comfortable highway built out of easy compromises, but a lonely, steep ascent, which requires the renunciation of craving and the ability to endure hardship and discomfort. Hence, the Buddha encouraged those monks who were truly keen on extricating from their hearts the subtlest roots of craving to adopt the Dhutanga, special vows of austerity conducive to simplicity, contentment, renunciation, and energy. And he often applauded those monks who observed these vows. And the ancient suttas repeatedly commend several austere practices. For example, using only the triple set of robes and refusing to use additional robes. Wearing only rag robes and refusing robes offered by householders. Subsisting only on food collected on alms round and refusing invitations to meals. That means going to devotees that invite them to their houses. Living only in the forest and refusing to live in town monasteries. And in the commentaries, the list of austere practices is expanded to 13, which are explained in detail in such works on the meditative life as the Visuddhimagga. And the robe that the Buddha offered Kassapa was made from a shroud that he had picked up in a cremation ground. And in asking Kassapa whether he would wear that robe, he was implicitly asking whether he would be able to make the full commitment to the austere practices that the use of such a robe would entail. And when Kassapa affirmed that he could wear the robe, he was saying, "Yes, Lord, I can fulfill the ascetic practices you wish me to undertake." And from that moment on, Kassapa pledged himself to uphold a life of strict austerity, and even in old age, he insisted on observing the same vows that he had undertaken in his youth. And on a later occasion, the Buddha declared Mahākassapa foremost among the bhikkhus who observed the austere practices, thereby bringing to fulfillment Kassapa's original aspiration formed 100,000 aeons in the past. So there you go. He aspired and he got it. Though it took a very long time, 100,000 aeons. It was only 7 days after his ordination and the exchange of robes that Kassapa attained the goal he was striving for, arahatship, the mind's final liberation from defilements. Recounting this episode to Ananda at a much later time, he declared, "For 7 days, friend, I ate the alms food of the country as a debtor. Then on the 8th day, the final knowledge of arahatship arose in me." There you go. So, 7 days. But then again, he was practicing for a very, very long time before, and also had encountered previous Buddhas in the past as well. So, long time coming. All right, so we can stop pause the reading there. We can continue the next one about Kaspa's relationship to the Buddha in the next reading session. Okay, let's stop there. Any thoughts, Pai and Paul? Comments, etc.? No?
And just to say, I find it quite interesting reading how people lived in the Buddha's era. Even when it's not strictly about Dharma, it's fascinating, isn't it? How they lived. Very good.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating how they live and also their thinking process. So whenever I read these stories or the Jatakas, I also draw inspiration from, so when I say thinking process, the conversation that goes on between the different characters when we read them alludes to what their thinking process is like. So the way they think and what sort of values they carry in them. So you're right, Paul, in the sense that these were the early days of the Buddha's teaching career. So it wasn't like at a time towards the end when, lots of people know about the Buddha's teachings. That it was really in the beginning, but even then, just based on how people lived, how people talk to each other, we can gather a little bit the kind of basic human values that were uphold into people's lives, even if they didn't know the Buddha's teaching, or even if they didn't know the Dhamma, at least there were some basic principles that people adhered to at that time. And that I appreciate. And sometimes it makes me wonder, I think some of these values we still have in some cultures, but with the advancement in human society, a lot of basic values also are diminishing, thanks to various factors. Really, I don't think there's any one overarching factor that governs everything else. I think it's all a combination of different things that come into play. And so I guess that also comes back to why it's all the more important we practice loving kindness more and more. I mean, that's the least we can do, not just for ourselves, but whoever we come into contact with. There's more and more stress, that's without a doubt. All ages, all group levels. And there is also, thanks to popular media, let's say, various concepts of what meditation is. Some are due to popular media. There's just so much description about what meditation is, or don't even use the word meditation, what mindfulness is. And then recently I found out that even the concept of neuroplasticity has so many different versions now. And some of it is being taught in school, because one of my students in her school, So she's in here it's year 7. That's just the first year of high school. And they've only just started rolling out neuroplasticity and talking about it in year 9, which is like 3rd year of high school. And then I asked her, because she has friends. So I asked her, okay, so how do they teach neuroplasticity in school? And when she told me, I was like, okay, so I didn't tell her. So when I teach music, I don't teach 6 hours, but I kind of compress it into 3. So it's not meant to lead them anywhere to the first jhana. That's not the intention. But I use it as a tool to help them train their brain, and music or the piano is just a tool to practice that training. So when I asked her, "Oh, can you share with me what exactly they're teaching?" And then I said to her, "Well, what do you think is the difference between what they teach and what I share with you?" And the main thing we found out that was different, the main thing, despite I didn't share with her the full 6 hours, I literally compressed into 3. The main thing that wasn't there was the relaxed step. And those of us who have been practicing TWIM and have been experiencing its benefits, and we've talked about it in a couple of past sessions before this as well, how important the relaxed step is. But I didn't say to her, my way or the highway. I actually said to her, don't believe me, or, here's what I would like you to do. I would like you to take these 2 approaches and experiment with it. But then I said to her, you cannot mix it up. So I said to her, okay, this is what you do. Yeah. Choose a day from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed. You choose one of the 2 practices, whether it's the one that's taught in your school or the 3 steps that I shared with you. And you have to promise yourself that from morning until night, you only do that one particular way. And you just see how your brain works. And then the next day, you go, okay, I'm going to scrap the first way and I'm going to try this other way. And only that one. So I'm not going to mix the 2. And I said to her, that was about a week ago, a week and a half ago. I said to her, I gave that as homework, as an experiment. I said, you try it as an experiment. Don't believe what I say. Don't believe anything. Just think of it as an experiment. Then tell me, what happens. So again, we see and it's been mentioned before, and Bhante Vimalaramsi used to mention before, and Venerable Sister Kema used to mention before, and a lot of the Twin guides still mention it in these Zoom sessions on Wednesdays, on Sundays, that the relaxed step is really, really important in the 6 hours. Because without that, we cannot possibly rewire the brain. Really, we cannot possibly. We're just suppressing. And the more we suppress, yeah, then the further we are from our potential. So that's one of the things I realize is still missing a lot. But there is something interesting I encountered yesterday. So I'm listening to a book by Dr. Judith Orloff. I've got so many books in my there's a reason why I'm reading this book. So the book's name is called The Empath's Survival Guide by Dr. Judith Orloff. So she's a um, um, psychiatrist, but also she has a medical degree. And in it, I think I'm somewhere around chapter 2 or something, and she made a reference to uh, you know, using different meditation tips and meditation techniques and all that to ground ourselves and stuff like that. And one of the things that she highlighted was to relax, which I thought was really nice. And she said something like, again, I may be butchering it because I can't exactly remember word for word, but if people are interested, they can go to the book. And she has a full-on website. And she said something like, well, if we're going to be in heaven, meaning feeling like we're in heaven as in the body, so having pleasurable feeling, if we're going to feel like we're in heaven, then we might as well relax into that feeling. And if we're going to be feeling like we're in hell, that means the body is feeling like terrible, then still it's probably a good idea to relax into that feeling as well. And so I thought, oh, this is the closest I've heard so far. Again, I don't listen to a lot of material, so maybe other people might have encountered some other new material out there right now that people are really talking more about relaxing into the discomfort or whatever it is that's bothering us. Sorry, did I digress a little bit again? My apologies. Uh,
Good.
sorry, Paul, you were going to say something?
I was just saying good to myself. I forgot my
Oh.
microphone on.
Yeah, anyway, just putting it out there. I don't know how many people listen to these recordings anyway, so I'm just putting it out there. If anyone's interested and would like to connect about what it's like being an empath or trying to figure out if you are one yourself, feel free to reach out or check out this book yourself. There, I think a lot more other books nowadays out there than there have been before. But Dr. Judith Orloff's book, I think she's got two, and her website, she's got a bunch of blogs, materials, interviews, news articles, even science-based articles. She's got lots of material on her website for anyone who's interested. Okay? All right. Shall we wrap up by sharing some merits? Shall we do that? Okay, let's do that. So let's share some merits. Let me try to put this in one page. There we go. May suffering ones be... Oh, wait, hang on. I'm not sharing it anymore. Let's do that here. Okay. Let's share some merits. May suffering ones be suffering free and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, thank you so much for dialing in, joining, listening, etc. And I wish you all a good week ahead.
Thank you. See you
Thank
next
you.
week.
See ya. Bye.